Hello everyone, welcome to Blue Dragon Actual. So today's video is related to types of companies and profile in actual sector. Actually, I posted on my community tab for the suggestions related to new topics on which I can make videos. In fact, I have a couple of ideas on my head, and one of those was kind of a master class on with profit policies, and those would be long videos. But then there was few good sessions like Solvency to IFRS 17. I think the problem with that is I cannot go much deeper into IFRS 17 because without workx you will have real difficulty understanding, and the type of audience I have for my channel, they would struggle to understand if I go much deeper into IFRS 17. There might be a one video, but there cannot be a series in IFRS 17. Same goes for Solvency 2. Solvency 2 maybe is slightly easier to explain as compared to IFRS 17. But one of the comment that was made was related to type of companies and profiles, and I think I have touched upon this topic multiple times in my several other videos, but I think I thought of making a dedicated video so that it will be helpful for many freshers who are maybe joining the actual sector right now. So without further delay, let's move on. So the first point is the types of companies. So types of companies in actual sector: KPOs or captives. Then we'll see what they are. Just remember the terminology or name: KPO or captive. KPO to stand for knowledge process outsourcing, or captives, right? And then there is BPO. We all know that is stand for business process outsourcing. There is the core sector, and there is consultancies. The reason I put consultancy at the bottom and in an extended or in expanded fashion is because consultancies might work as KPO, consultancies might work as BPO, and some part consultancies also work with core companies, also work for the core companies. So that's why consultancies does all these three types of work, and that's why that is I have kind of expanded the length of the consultancies here. So let's move on. First, we will move from the core sector because that is the important. Although I have shown core at the third point in my previous slide, but this is the crux, like this is the main thing in Actuary. And if you understand how they work, probably the other two sectors are kind of subset of core in terms of profiles. So core are the companies where they have their own product, as you can see, right? So for examples, there is Life, HDFC Life, ICICI Prudential, Max Life. So all this is I mean these are the companies which are core companies who are selling their own products, right? So they have a, and usually the teams that are present in core are predominantly pricing, valuation, modeling. Within valuation, there might be separate division. For example, there might be a shareholder reporting team. There might be a maybe a prudential reporting team or IID reporting team. In pricing, there might be individual pricing, group pricing. And modeling, there might be multiple. There might be embedded value modeling team. There might be a valuation modeling team. There might be multiple teams within modeling and within this like work streams. But I mean, the predominantly it's the three variety of work that exist in actual sector, and this is for both life and general insurance, or PNC sector. So pricing, valuation, modeling are the main three major work streams. I'm talking only from a life insurance perspective because I cannot comment on from the general insurance perspective, though I have an idea, but I think it would be incorrect for me because I have worked only on the life insurance sector. So in order of preference, it would be pricing. So pricing, and also in order of syllabus, like you are kind of taught pricing before. As for example, in CT5, the profit testing chapter, that is exactly what people do in pricing. And also pricing is slightly easier to do because it is done mostly in Excel and using VBA. So you don't need expertise of an actual software like Profit or Geo Axis. So usually you can start with pricing, especially if you are working on participating product. The pricing models are very complicated and you learn a lot in pricing. In fact, till today, the pricing models of participating product, I there would be areas that I don't understand. So it's quite complicated in that regard. But because it's not that uh, like it's limited to an extent, and because it is slightly more easier to understand, slightly more judgment is involved. That is why it is kind of taught in CT5, or I think whatever it is now called CM1. So that's why pricing is slightly easier. Then we move on to modeling. Here the experience for an actual software is important, and we all know that in market there is a lot of demand for actual software. In fact, few people places recruitment ads like experience in profit is mandatory or experience in GGY is mandatory. So although I don't agree with such ads, and people who are kind of placing those ads are myopic in their own vision, but that requirement do exist, like no one can deny that. So modeling is where you probably require all the knowledge that you require in pricing, but along with that you require the knowledge for actual software. And finally, the most important or most preferred would be the valuation, where you are working with the regulators or you are working with the shareholders, so you understand what the customer, what your end customer wants, and you need to produce a report. And obviously a company is known by the reports. The liabilities are very important for an insurer. A company can go bankrupt and the liability number is defined by the valuation team, right? And it is because of the valuation team that there might be requirements which the modeling team will cater to, right? And pricing team would work on their own, and they would have like different teams at different workload and peak workload time. Pricing team would be usually working much harder during February and March. Modeling team would probably have an uniform pressure throughout the year, and valuation team would be working much harder during after the pricing team is done working. So maybe after April to May, April to June, valuation team would be working very hard. The reason valuation is also important is because in order to be an appointed actuary, which is the topmost position, you need some years of work ex. So usually for life insurance it is 5 years. I think for like health insurance is 3 years. So that is after qualification you require 5 years of work ex. There is also other criteria that you require 10 years of work ex to be an appointed actuary, but and that is by regulation, you cannot change that. So but you have to have 5 years of after post qualification you need 5 years of experience, out of which I think 3 years would be in valuation. I don't remember the regulation exactly, but that experience in valuation is so important that that appointed actuary, to become an appointed actuary require that experience. And that is justifiably so, because you are putting the number on liability, you are responsible for that number. And there is that is why that is important. But there are multiple ways you can kind of show your modeling experience as valuation, and people do that all the time. So that is not important, but obviously if you have real valuation experience, it's quite important, right? And that does not mean that pricing is easy or pricing is not valued, but in order of preference in the industry, I think this is the preference. If I talk slightly about the general insurance, although I do not have any experience on that, but depending on my conversation with my friends who work in that sector, so from there, and when I say valuation means reserving as well, because we are creating the reserve, right? So valuation represent reserving as well. So their pricing is more important, and they are also the syllabus of actual society also changes. So I think ST7 and ST8. So ST7 and ST8 are on pricing. There are two papers on pricing. So you can see pricing is important. Pricing is important, and pricing is difficult in general insurance as compared to in life insurance, because in life insurance there is only one decrement or two decrement, maybe lapse and death. But in general insurance there may be multiple decrements, and that's why to factor those. Pricing is difficult. But because it is a short term business, mostly general insurance short term business, although there are a few very long term business, that's why modeling is very easy. So you can model using Python or SAS. But for life insurance, because it is a long term business, you require actual software to do that, right? And valuation, because once again, because it is a short term business, valuation is also easy. It is easier to put a reserve for or a liability for a business which is 1 year of duration than to put a number for 20 years or 30 years of duration. So I think that's why pricing is more important. So if it is in general insurance, the order would just reverse: pricing, then modeling, and then valuation, maybe in that manner. And there are two other streams. One is risk management. Usually there is a chief risk officer, and sometimes that might be the appointed actuary, might also be the chief risk officer, or that might be a separate person, and that is part of corporate governance. Because of that, the risk management would lie under that person. And risk management is also an upcoming area where all the departments would be kind of incorporated in that. Would also involves operations, because there might be some risk in the operation area. as well. Other than actuarial areas, there might be also severe risk in the investment department. So risk management is an upcoming sector in actuary, and many people are working on that. Also ALM. ALM is mostly kind of done by the investment team. Actuaries just have a normal say in that. As for example, ALM team would produce the discount rate, and actuaries might tell the way to kind of prepare the discount rate, or maybe the adjustment that has to be added to the risk-free rate. So actuaries might tell that, but it will be mostly the investment team who would be kind of creating the discount rate depending on the investment they have made, right? So these two areas, risk management and ALM, are slightly actual. They're like, it varies between actual and non-actual. Some portion would be actual, some portion would be non-actual. And this does not mean that these areas are not important, or these areas are of any less important, like less relevance, but they are upcoming areas. But if you talk about pure actuarial role, then risk management and ALM would be slightly behind at this point of time. Maybe 5 years down the line, things might change. Moving on, KPO and captives. So examples will be Sun Life, the company that I work in, AXA Business, AIG, although AIG does not exist now, Excel, Catlin, RSA, RGA, Swiss Re, etc. So they work for their own company. For example, Sun Life work for their own company. And there is also a confusion, like there is also a company called Birla Sun Life. So I don't work in Birla Sun Life. Birla Sun Life is a joint venture between Sun Life and Aditya Birla Group. And Sun Life is a captive which is separate from Birla Sun Life, which is located in Gurgaon, and Birla Sun Life is located in Mumbai, right? So Sun Life is a captive which does the work for the Sun Life group, which is present throughout the world, and that is done at a cheaper rate. Same goes for AXA Business, same goes for Excel, Catlin, RSA, So these are big companies, and there is a back office that is established in India, because equally competent labor is available at much cheaper price. So that's why these are set up. So this reduces the cost at an overall company level. So that's the basics basis behind KPO, setting up in KPO. That is why it is called knowledge process outsourcing, right? So predominantly there would be modeling work in life and reserving work in PNC that would be done in KPOs. The reason pricing is not done is because usually there will be data related restrictions from different regulations. Like, as for example, if I apply for, say, I'm in US, and my salary or other details would be available, or medical details might be available to an insurer, and that might be put into the proposal form. And when the data entry happens, that might be part of the enforced extract that is used to create those numbers, reserves, and etc. So that there might be a restriction that your numbers may not pass to other countries. So that's why you cannot use pricing models to price the product, especially for group pricing. This is a case, so there is a restriction. So that's why mostly pricing is not done, especially in life. Pricing is kind of not outsourced, and predominantly modeling would be the work that would be done. Like, most of the KPOs that exist in there, they do work in modeling, which will be understanding the valuation models and writing codes to modify those models. And in PNC, it would be mostly reserving. As I mentioned, reserving is an easier work. One of the most important thing is to understand this O part of the KPO, which is outsourcing. So obviously we'll outsource those work which are not which does not involve brain activity, but which are easier to do, right? You will, like, for our own example, you will outsource the Zomato, like food delivery to Zomato, but you will not outsource the maybe withdrawal 20 lakhs rupees from bank to Zomato. You will go yourself to bank and do that, right? I mean, that's how it works. So that's why the outsourcing portion is important. That's why in core you will probably learn much faster, because you are working with real products, and there is no outsourcing. You yourself has to deliver the product or deliver the service. But in KPO, you are kind of assisting the main team that is sitting there. Although many companies are moving away from that culture, that client and servant culture. So many companies, many KPOs are moving away from that culture, but it still exists in India. Some bit of valuation might also be done in KPOs, but mostly what I have seen is those are data driven role. Like people are working on Excel and VBA. and that is what they are called valuation, but those are actually not valuation. Valuation is something where you require an actual software to kind of project and calculate the reserve. If you're not doing that, you're probably not in valuation role. But people call those valuation because those might be, like the side byproduct of valuation. So that's how it is. And ALM, so ALM, as I mentioned, is a fast moving role. So ALM is an area where actuaries are also required and the investment guys are also required. And you need to, especially in market consistent pricing like IFRS 17 or market consistent environment, IFRS 17 solvency to liability and asset are detached. So because of that, ALM becomes very important to understand how much asset you have and whether there is a liquidity risk or whether there is a solvency risk or whether there is a credit risk. You have to understand depending on ALM. So the investment people are also required, the actual people are also required. However, actual people are not required that much. Investment people are more required at this point of time. So as I mentioned, it is slightly non-actual work, but obviously, I mean, these are evolving field, and one day this field might take over every other field, and there is a lot of risk. I personally believe that if you are working in ALM, you should work in you should trade in stock market, and you should not work in ALM sector, because I mean that is slightly non-actual. If you want to understand how ALM works, better to devote that energy and that passion in stock market. But that's an upcoming thing. If you have worked reasonably for a long time in valuation modeling and you are bored, probably want to move into ALM, that would be a new field, new challenge for you. And that's like it's great if you want to do that. Moving on, BPO. So BPO does work for others. As for example, Accenture works for AIG, Prudential as well. Then EXL work for Paramika, WNS work for Aviva. So there are like that. There will be a separate company, and that company have some work which this company would be providing the services for. So they also predominantly work in modeling, in life, and preserving in PNC, because these are the works. These are works that are slightly easier. There is no regulatory restrictions, and that can be transferred, right, to an offshore country, and people can be trained on that. So that's why these are the starting work at least, and slowly maybe the best performer in the the KPO or BPO sector, they might have some work that would be equivalent to a maybe a core company work. But and not all KPOs or BPOs would work in the same level and have the same level of knowledge as compared to a core company. That is why you'll see people from core companies would have slightly better knowledge level in their areas, but people from captive or BPO sector would have slightly poorer knowledge, and that is because the type of work they do. And especially in any financial certification, if you only have bookish knowledge, then you will only be a paper actuary. The thing that I have mentioned time and again. So you need good work to kind of augment that financial theoretical knowledge. So some bit of valuation as well, as I mentioned, but once again, this might be a data management. In fact, most of the work that I've seen in BPO sector are usually data driven role. Very good quality actual work are usually not present in WNS or other BPOs. So the reason for that, once again, is outsourcing. You would be outsourcing work that would be easier for other people to do. That does not mean that or every people is working on some easier or some cheap project. That is not my intention. There would be people there who are very good, and they are working on very tough project, but not all of them. Majority would be working on a simpler project. And for you to work on a very difficult or tough challenging project, you need to be there in that company for a long time, and you need to have that visibility and that expertise so that you yourself get that work, right? And it depends on project. There might be a company which will have very difficult higher recruitment. For example, IFRS 17. For IFRS 17, a company might approach WNS for some work, and that work might be very challenging. So it depends on project and depends on time, right? So I mean, whatever I am speaking, I'm just speaking honestly from my experience, and that's what I've seen, and also based on feedback I've got from many of my peers. Finally, moving on to the consultancies. So consultancies work in multiple areas of implementation and project and then project based roles. So for example, IFRS 17 is something which is requiring actual expertise, which also requires technical expertise, which also require accountancy expertise, etc., etc., etc. So a company which bring expertise in all these domain might be a big four like UI or Deloitte or KPMG, PwC. These are the big fours. So they have audit department, they have accountancy department, they have an actual department. So a company can approach UI for all of these services, right? And they would provide a consolidated service which would be much cheaper as compared to a company which will be providing only one service. Then and that is also a headache because you need to negotiate multiple contracts and multiple documents need to be maintained for multiple consultancies. So you can approach only one company. And also, if the company has expertise, for example, if say Deloitte is working in Europe and Deloitte is approached by a Canadian company, then the Canadian company might be interested in what practice is followed in Europe. So in that case, Deloitte would have an edge because over maybe other consultancies saying that I have worked in or they have worked in Europe, and those experience or those expertise can be used to help the clients in Canada. So once again, these are project based, and those would be big projects, right? And there will be multiple teams involved. Sometimes the project might also be for documentation or for creating some like development papers. If you are struggling in area, then you want to have the understanding of the practice, or if the standard is not clear, you want to understand how other companies are working on something, or you might want to have some expertise of a software which the consultancies might already have because of work in some other domain or in some other country, but that software is new for your country. So for all these areas, for all this bigger implementation, you would employ an consultancy, and that's why they have the biggest budget. In terms of budget, core would have the lesser budget because in India the insurance sector is not that big. Then it would be KPO because they are getting paid in dollars, and then there would be consultancies which have the biggest budget because they are working with multiple geographies, and they are charging money for their expertise, and your expertise pays really well. If you have a very strong expertise, then I mean, then you'll be paid for that, right? So I think that's it. So, but and consultancies may also work for like a BPO, as for example, UIGDS. I think it's Global Delivery System or Global Delivery Service. So that portion of UI. So UI has two vertical. One is consultancy, which works with core companies as a consultancy, as for example, embedded value implementation, solvency implementation, IFRS 17 implementation. There is also the GDS vertical, which work as a BPO. Like it take work from say different company like say like Aviva, and may work for Aviva for a particular project, right? So they can also play this roles. They can also work with a core company, say for embedded value implementation. They can also work with a KPO for some reason, maybe for creating some paper, or maybe for training their resources on say profit, etc. And they might also work as a KPO or as a BPO and provide service to a company which is located offshore. So I hope with this it would be very beneficial and for the freshers, and you are able to understand how the profiles are and how a system moves, and how the companies hire, and what the companies are looking for, what are the profiles they work on. So if you are working in say a consultancy KPO, then probably your technical skill matter more because you need to code, right? Because you are into modeling. Usually KPOs work in modeling, so you need to code. But if you go into a core sector, maybe your coding skill is not that relevant. Maybe there you need to understand the product more, or you need to understand the business more, or you need to understand the regulator more, right? So, but that expertise or that is not required. So if you are working in a KPO sector for a long time, then probably you are lacking in these areas. Once you have that self-awareness, if you try to build your expertise in those areas, like maybe what are the regulations, or how can I understand the regulation, how can I simplify the regulations, then you will be doing very well because your coding portion has already improved much better than the core companies, right? And then you also have understanding of the regulations. Similarly, if you are in core sector, you have to work in the other areas where you are lacking. Maybe your communication is not that good because people from KP are consistently talking with people from Canada, US, etc. So their communication has to be good, their presentation skill has to be good, but maybe for you that is lacking. maybe you can improve that communication and use that communication to your advantage with communication while negotiating with the regulator, right? So there are multiple areas where people, if you are self-aware and if you're sincere enough, you can improve depending on this. So I mean, I hope that you like this presentation. If you like the presentation, please hit the like button and please subscribe to my channel. Thanks for watching this, and please share this with all your friends. Please hit the bell icon and see you in future videos.